Good afternoon, everybody. DMGeezerjim here, back to my YouTube series. My apologies, I've been sick. Been a little bit busy doing some other stuff. Hadn't made a video in a few days. Wanted to correct that and get back on track. Figured a great place to start is continuing on with my classic module series. Catch up with some of my other stuff as well as the DM series will get back on track. Planescape. I'm trying really hard to get a preview. I don't think I'm going to be able to, so I'm just going to flood the old content before the new content gets there. It is what it is. Likewise, but yeah, thank you for joining me. This is DMGeezerjim Presents Classic Modules. Today we're going to take a look at the D1, D2 Descent into the Depths of the Earth. This is a classic module. Real quick, let me get some art up so you can see what I'm referring to. There we go. That's a little cleaner looking anyway. This was part of the classic GDQ series of modules. Gary Gygax published 1978. The copy that we're looking at is published in 1981. Part of the Giant Drow Queen series. Just for reference sake, we do have all the entire product line in front of us. There's been other... Check my other series for an in-depth review on Against the Giants, the Frost Giants, the Hill Giants, the Fire Giants, represented in 5th edition in the Tales from the Yawning Portal as well. This was the start of the campaign, so to speak. The party goes up and defeats the Hill Giants, finds out about a group of Frost Giants, kills the Frost Giants, finds an ambassador to the Fire Giants. Kills the Fire Giants, finds a group of Drow, chase the Drow into the Underdark, which will ultimately lead them into the descent to the depths of the earth, chasing the legendary Drow, the Dark Elves. Just so you know, this was their first true appearance as antagonist, non-player characters in the Dungeons & Dragons world. 1978, so you could say they're part of the original bad guys of D&D. So the module drives, the party's driven to continue from whatever sources that you used for your campaign, threatened with whatever to go into the depths of the earth, find out, pursue these foul devils, these hereto unknown dark elves, and find out what they're really up to. So the party goes through the descent of the depths of the earth to the Vault of the Drow. The Vault of the Drow is the first true dark elf city, detailed out really well in its own module. The party gets into the city, infiltrates the city, fights through the city. However, they get in there and find out that Loth, the Demon Queen of Spiders, is in fact positioning to unleash a major attack. Everything's been pawns for that, and that leads them to the Queen of the Demon Web Pits. Okay, GDQ series. Now, each of these on their own is their own module, is their own thing, and I'm going to spend time talking about each of these at great length as part of this series. Just to keep everything in context, understand that'll be kind of the pretext for all of these. Now, before we get too deep in it, I certainly want to take a second and say, hey, if you're enjoying the series, like, follow, comments, do all that kind of stuff is great. Subscribe to the channel. Use the comments. If you have questions, please make sure, comments, feedback, anything. Drop it in the comments. I'm always checking them. I'm more than happy to interact. I'd like to talk about the stuff. I put as much fact and canon, if you will, as I can. But obviously, some of this being older content, it can be a little bit of opinion, editorial decision, whatever you want to call it. So I'm more than happy to engage in any discussions at a greater length. If there's something that you want to know more about that I didn't talk about, man, I'll follow you up on the comments. So yeah, definitely feel free to ask questions, add commentary in there. I monitor it. So anyway, on to our product here. D1-2 Descent into the Depths of the Earth, designed for character levels 9 through 14 in 1st edition Dungeons & Dragons. That would probably translate power curve to 6-ish. For 5th edition, just based on difficulty classes, action economy, things like that. Right out the gate, I'm going to tell you that a lot of what's in these modules is not going to translate very well to 5th edition as written. Dark Elves are handled differently in 5th edition. Their equipment, their gearing, everything else is dramatically different post honestly, after second edition is when they really got away from the enchanted dark elf adamantine armor and that kind of stuff. So that's going to be the first thing to understand. This is not the D series, D1, D2, and honestly the Q series do not translate very well to 5th edition. It's going to take a lot of work from the simple fact that the stats, it's very, very difficult to true up the stats. Your typical Dark Elf NPC in this module series is going to be a dual class, 3rd level fighter, 5th level magic user. The lowest of the low is a 3rd level fighter, basically a veteran. So starting out the gate, you're dealing with higher level, which should reflect itself in the adventure levels being there. Secondly, volume, as was typical for your classic content, your 1st edition, 2nd edition content. Numbers of NPCs denoted the difficulty in encounter, as well as being on a like power level of the player characters. So just putting that on the front end. Your Dark Elf, your Drow encounters will definitely need to be adjusted for 5th edition content. Either you homebrew 5th edition versions of these multi-class Dark Elves, or you substitute non-player character stat blocks that exist. Your call, up to you. I'm not going to tell you. I think that's honestly setting dependent. If you're running a traditional Greyhawk, Mystara, low magic, traditional sense, conservative, whatever you want, what term you want to use, old school, Tolkien-esque, then you're probably going to build the Dark Elves up to be a little bit more powerful than just a purple skinned version of an elf. If you're in Forgotten Realms, and you have to throw all of that out because a Dark Elf's just a purple skinned elf. So the rest of everything else goes through it is not there. Keep that in mind for how you're applying this to your campaign, or if you build this around. So the first 2 pages just go into a lot of depth about what you need to know in regards to lighting, terrain difficulty. There are no figures given for difficulty checks. I would definitely make sure that you're setting off a little notepad and giving yourself, here's an example, Dungeon Master Notes. The scale of the map is bad, okay? The movement scale is different. Unless you're going to completely homebrew away from the 5th edition rules, standard rules of movement, aka 30 feet of movement in combat equals 30 miles of movement in daily travel. That's a lot of movement in non-difficult on-a-road terrain, which is kind of, simplified hand-waving, but it works. Right off the bat, you're told here the maximum rate of travel is 1 hex per day per 1 inch of basic movement rate of the slowest member. Inches were a different thing. That would basically be almost the same thing. 1 mile per 1 inch. 12 inches was the maximum movement a player could have then. So the assumption would be 12 miles would be the absolute fastest a party could move in this. This rate only if unnecessary delays and careful map making are avoided. Reduce the movement rate by 1 mile for every hour of delay, and assume that careful mapping will slow the party 6 miles. Why is that important? Because this is not a big area. Our first reference to the Underdark is this map here. This is the player map of it. 1 hex equals 1 mile. 3-day trip. If there's no encounters, if there's no delays, if there's no anything as the crow flies. Even worse in 5th edition rules. You could limit them to 15 miles. That's a 2-day trip. So you definitely need to keep in mind that the idea of the scale of this, if you want it to feel like this epic trip into the Underdark, you want to make sure that the scale is adjusted for to begin with. Even if you're using the given maps, I would recommend taking the scale up to a mile equals 3 hexes, maybe even a mile equals 5 hexes. Up to you. You don't have to redo the map. You just need to redo the scale if you're expecting it to be a nice long jaunt. Now, remember, this is level 9 to 12, 14. This is 10 to 14. This is 10 to 14. These were not designed to be campaign length. So the concept was that your party could potentially make their way from the Fire Giant Temple to the Drow City in 3 or 4 days of travel and combat. Probably 6 was the idea, because you're going to long rest after a couple of these fights. You're going to absolutely have to, notwithstanding if they're driven off the beaten path. So the length of the campaign, the length of the module is going to vary based on how you want to use it. If you use it as written, with the scale as written, a 5th edition group can cover everything in this territory in 2 or 3 game days, 3 long rests, depending on it as it's written, straight up. There's lots of random monster tables given, lots of information given for the difficulty checks. For the terrain is the next thing you want to kind of look at. You may have crevasses or sinkholes and stuff like that, illustrated on your map if you want it to have more of a difficulty, more of an alien, underground, dangerous, underdark feel to it. You need to make sure that you have chasms that drop off the side of the passage, and low-hanging stalagmites and broken up Scrabble that the party can slide down if they're not careful. So difficult terrain is something that you can do. Certainly set up a few points in there where your party will have some, I wouldn't say a regular system that you have on hand. You guys have to jump over this chasm. Athletics checks. DC checks as some rock starts falling from above you to avoid a stalagmite falling off of you. Maybe the path itself is completely gone in this certain point. Your party needs to move along with it. So the assumption that's given in the book is that you, the dungeon master, us dungeon masters, are going to spend the extra amount of time taking the idea that we're in an Underdark, using these examples and turning it into our own very threatening, dangerous environment. And then it goes in to kind of talk about the path that's listed according to math. There's a certain encounter at Hex 3 that cannot be avoided. And there's a drow, a dark elf checkpoint that's detailed, and then from there, the party can start going off the trail. Let's get down to the mapping so you can kind of understand a little bit more what I'm talking about. Real quick, so we don't have to go back to them while I'm looking at them. These panels are more, this was back in the Theater of the Mind day, but they're certainly duplicable for virtual tabletop with a minimal amount of effort. Geomorphic tiles, just to give you, you're covering a lot of mileage. There's a lot of, even if you're using a small scale, there's going to be a lot of chances for random encounters and side encounters. So you definitely want to have a selection of cave maps, tunnel maps, underground river maps, whether you're borrowing from this set or making your own. I do have some available on my Etsy, some on my actually over on my Etsy and Patreon. There's a 40 map pack containing maps that are perfect for this kind of a design. Small, simple, printable, or loadable into a VTT, up to you. Make your own, however you want to do it, So shameless plug, absolutely. But yeah, you want to have a series of maps on hand, even if you're Theater of the Mind, so something to be able to refer to. And if you're running Theater of the Mind, this book works just fine for what you need for your maps. Small territories, tunnels, 10 foot. By the way, the scales are all 10 foot. These old schools, 10 foot. New schools, 5 foot. So these tunnels are bigger than they look. That's a 40-foot wide main passage. That's a 10-foot wide smaller passage. So yeah, you keep your maps on hand. But anyway, the player's map is provided. That's something that they'll find during the search of the Fire Giant Hall. That does, in fact, correspond almost perfectly with the, you know what, let me do a little bit better job of this here, because I can actually pop over to this one and we can do a side-by-side. Give me just a second to pull my DM version up. There we go. And let me move you off to a little behind-the-scenes ugliness. All right, and then we want to go back to this one here and move you off to the right pane. All right, give me one more second. A couple tweaks there, but we definitely I want to spend a little bit of time here, so we're going to set it up right quick. A real pro would have had all that preset. I'm working on it, y'all. But anyway, player's map versus DM's map. Player's map on the right, let me scroll up a little bit so you can actually see where the entry tunnel is, will correspond perfectly, hex for hex, in each location with the darkened hex on the player map. Now, or on the DM map. Now let me zoom in on this one a little bit more. You can notice the little details of an eye on that one and some sort of squiggy thing there and something there. Um, there's some nice little details. So this is definitely a fun handout for your players, whether you use it directly as it's shown or whether you make your own creation of it. The player's map versus the DM map is a great fun component for this either this module as written or for the using this as a backbone to build your own. Just a little bit of an aside: if you're playing around with Out of the Abyss, I would definitely call D1 D2 a great supplement for it. Out of the Abyss is an interesting campaign, has you running around underground quite a bit. Lacks some of the details in some of the places. It's really good as a point to point, but it does suffer a little bit on a hex crawl in providing you resources to execute the module. And you can make up with some of those resources by adding in D1 to D2. Different themes. They're we can speculate day in, day out. I firmly believe that Out of the Abyss is an adaptation of the D1 through 3 series and the 3rd edition Return to the Demon Web Pits, Expedition to Demon Web Pits. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we do a review on that one, so come back for that. But D1, D2. So your party's gotten this map, and the module as written will be enough to get them to this point right here, 3/4 of the way through the dungeon. Now, as you're sitting here looking at, hopefully, if you're thinking about it, you're like, man, that map on the left looks really cool. There's all kinds of tunnels and passages and potential encounters and caves and et cetera, all through here. But they don't ever have to go to it. Yeah, you're right. They really don't. The player's map takes them straight to the Vault of the Drow. No deviations, no real issues. One little secret off of the map here, and all it is, if you look at it, you're like, well, what does that hex lead to? It's just a tunnel. So it is lacking. Now, if you want to keep it nice and clean and quick, you don't worry about it. You've got 3 or 4 days of underground travel and, 2 or 3 days of long rests and poof, your party's at the Vault of the Drow ready to fight their butts off. It's not quite that easy, but in theory, that's what could happen. So you have a couple options. You can cut some of these tunnels off. Their map may show the tunnel, but you as a DM have clove that tunnel off, and you're going to force them to go around and find their way back in. Dangerous game, but fun game. Make this map be part, if you're going to use it as a visual aid, if you can use it as something to guide your party, make it a challenge. Make it part of their challenges. Okay, the map only gets us part of the way there. How do we get from there to here? And as you're looking at the player side of it, you're probably seeing, or the DM side of it, you're seeing opportunities where some of these are shortcuts that the players don't see. Some of these are tunnels that don't even exist for the players. A lot of extra encounters on the outside. Use that. Definitely lean into building off of building off of the tools that are in front of you to make it a more expansive campaign if you want to or need to. Now, the flip side of that, let's go back to full screen here. The flip side of that is the more you add, the more you have to prepare. So you do have some information in your random encounter tables. The random monsters for the passages for each stage can certainly seed some ideas. A lot of this stuff is wandering. Some of this stuff has homes. The gas spores and the fire beetles, maybe you put those in one of the side caves instead of having it sitting in a passageway that your group is going through. Voice is still a little bit rough. My apologies. So as we're taking a deeper look into it, we're going to the next stage, which is your encounter tables. Drow patrols, giant slugs, trolls with troglodytes, ghasts with troglodytes, rust monsters, drows, a drow merchant train, female patrol. Remember, this is old school D&D. These are older dark elves. This was still the matriarchy versus the patriarchy. Women were in charge. Drow females were the center of power. And I think a lot of that still lives in 5th edition in Forgotten Realms, at least in Menzo Baronson. So the consistency, the current itineration of the bad guy drow is consistent with their origins here. But just making that mention that your females are always going to be stronger as in relation to your males. Merchant, mixed, medium trains. So your party is going to have the potential to run into like wagon trains of dark elves as they transit down the passages. A lot of preparations you're going to do. If you're going combat heavy, then it's stat blocks and you go. If you're um, wanting opportunities for dialogue, negotiations, infiltrations, and all that, you're certainly given that part as part of the random, but you're not given the information to flesh that section out. So that's exactly what I mean. If you want a drow caravan to have an inn for your party to sneak in, that's a great idea, but that's on you. It's not suggested in this module. It's not supported. It's not discouraged. This is just a list of these are how many people are there. This is how much they're carrying. This is how hard they hit. And outside of that, everything else is your purview as a DM, good and bad. Good that you have the flexibility and the freedom to do that. Bad that it's completely dependent on your creativity and ability to incorporate those ideas into what's given to you. Ironically, yeah, it's an older product. There was a lot. We're benefiting from 40 plus years of Dungeons and Dragons being written and played in the 5th edition because a lot of your modern campaign books and adventures give you, if your party wants this interaction, then you have this option. Should your party do this, then you have those options. That's given in modern books. It's don't look for that in your classics. Unfortunately, that's lacking there. So you're never going to be able, very rarely are you going to be able to do a one-for-one translation between a classic module to 5th edition. So, but on and on and on. You have, primary passages. Mostly it's going to be, if people run into anything, it's going to be a civilized group, humanoid type thing. There's a chance for a beholder roaming through here. Black puddings, ochre jellies, gray oozes. Does that mean DM Geezer saying that you got to put a beholder floating down a main tunnel? No. But you have source material to have a beholder held up in one of these caves somewhere out there. You can certainly make that part of the encounter, part of the campaign. That's expanding it from a straight shot down a highway to having to get off the side roads and cut through the back roads and the seedy neighborhoods to get to where you need to go, if you want to look at it like that. But yeah, the side passages will give you some fun ideas as well. Secondary shriekers, spiders, giant slugs, bullets, rust monsters, purple worm, ropers. Ropers are always fun in a cavern full of stalagmites. Don't ever forget they can sit on the roof just as much as they can sit on the floor, and they ain't got no problem dropping a fool from 40 feet in the ground to let them take the falling damage if you cut that arm off. Pro tip, remember, ropers don't always sit on the ground, man. You want to make ropers tougher? Stick them on a roof 30 feet above because they have 30-foot reach. Every time your party gets let go, that's 3d6 falling damage. Wait, don't kill it. I'll fall. Sorry, a little bit of a DM aside there. Umber Hulks, Germ Lanes, new creatures for this book. Piercers, Green Slimes, Vampire. A vampire could be hiding in here somewhere. Illithids, yes, Mind Flayers make appearances. You can go completely sideways with that if you wanted to. So the plus side is, because this is so early in 1st edition, very few of the monsters that you're going to see listed here are unique. Almost all of them, you'll be able to find them as written in 5th edition as stat blocks. Black Pudding, stat block for 5th edition. Shadows, stat block for 5th edition. Bulette, stat block for 5th edition. The only thing you're going to have different is going to be the drow, the dark elves themselves. Everything else is well represented in 5th edition stat blocks. Have to adjust for the amount of bad guys, 19 to 24 bugbears with 25 to 30 slaves in a 40-foot wide tunnel. We'll just use the low end of each of that. That's 44 tokens in a 40-foot tunnel. That's a big caravan of dudes. That's a lot to mess with as a DM. Certainly manageable for a 6th, 7th, 8th level party. 19 bugbears is going to take some chunks out of them. But so that's what I'm talking about when I say look at the scope, the volume of monsters included. 3 to 18 gargoyles. 3 gargoyles is easy. 5 gargoyles is fun. 18 gargoyles is nigh impossible for anyone to deal with. Even at 10th level, that's going to be a challenging fight if you're giving the gargoyles altitude and room to fly around. So that's another idea for a chamber. One of the off chambers, the chamber of leering statues, or something like that. That's where you can use the random monster tables both for random monsters and for idea generation to help you stock out side passages and side caves and stuff like that. Okay. Then we get directly into some encounter areas. I don't want to spend too much time on each of those as written. We're just going to give you some examples, mainly because that's the big adjustment when we get to the Dark Elves. Let's get to that, and then we'll move on from there. Dark Elves. First thing you notice, every one of them is going to have magic weapons when you look at this, and magic armor. The Evil High Priestess is a 9th level cleric wearing +4 chainmail with a +3 buckler and a +3 dexterity bonus for an overall armor class of -6. That would translate to an armor class of 26 in 5th edition. There is no +4 armor in 5th edition. There is no +3 dexterity on top of +4 chainmail and a +3 buckler. So a lot of the numbers are huge. And this is just a guard. This isn't even a boss. This is like the boss of the outpost that they come to, the first encounter area. This is like, welcome to the Underdark, fight this chick. And so that's what that I wanted to get directly to those. Let me zoom in so you don't think I'm like making this stuff up here. Yes, 9th level cleric, 48 hit points, and obviously look how horrifying the stat blocks were back there. Hit points 48, armor class -6, armed with a +4 mace that doesn't exist, a special magical cloak under her normal black hooded robe that is a lurker cloak. Think cloaker. Enables her to assume the form and locomotion of a lurker once per day for up to 2 hours at a time. And then these are all of her spell abilities. Bless, cure light wounds twice a day, protection from good, fear. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spell slots back then. No. It's 4 now, but that's a lot of stuff for her to be able to drop, okay? In addition, and that's the boss, let's go ahead and look at just some of our normal ones. Hit points 10 hit points each for 2nd level, which we're laughing at that nowadays. That would be 25, 30 hit points. 8 of them coming at you with armor classes of 20, though. +1 chainmail, +1 buckler, +2 for dexterity. You're like, okay, what the hell is my party going to do with all of this gear? Now that's where we're going to rewind just a brief bit to this paragraph here. And this is where things differ between old and new D&D. Special notes regarding drow cloaks, armor, and weapons. All of these items have special properties, although none of them radiate magic. The items are made under the conditions particular to the strange homeland of the drow, for this place's unknown radiations which impart special properties to these cloaks, armor, and weapons. When such items are exposed to direct sunlight, a rotting process sets in. The process is absolutely irreversible, and within 2 weeks, cloaks will fall to shreds, while armor and weapons become pitted and unusable. If items are not exposed to sunlight, they retain their magic properties for 31 to 50 days before losing them, and if they're exposed to the radiation of the drow homeland 30 or so days, they remain potent. Items not spoiled by sunlight. So just legalese for saying that all of these super buff magic items that the drow are running around with as part of this module are unique to this environment. So there is some hand waving given even then, back in 1978, saying, look, we don't want our players running around with +4 everything on all of their people. The moment they leave the vault, the moment they get to sunrise, it all goes away, so it's okay for story purposes. How do you handle that for 5th edition? That's tough, man. Maybe give them a higher innate armor class. Obviously you can go plate mail, stuff like that, but you're going to have to do a little bit extra there as a dungeon master to make sure that the Dark Elves have the combat capability that they're supposed to match the players that are coming in here. The idea then is, and I guess it still holds true, your door guard is if you look at a stat block for a 5th edition guard, it's like a 1/8 CR monster. A 1st level player can kill 2 guards and not break a sweat. So your guards for the Dark Elves are 3rd level fighters. Hypothetically, would be veteran level. Now, Veterans are thick. They're pretty stout, but they don't have an armor class of 20. They don't have the armor class to deal with what your players are throwing at them. So figure out how to get, maybe use some Cultist of Bane. Is it the Bane guys? Yeah, the Fists of Bane have really high armor class. So you can start digging around in some of your other 5th edition standardized stat blocks to find parallels, or you can homebrew. But understand that every Dark Elf that your party is going to run into is going to be overpowered in regards to their gear if you do a 1-for-1 translation. You can't do that and expect your party not to use those +4 weapons and armor against you as they're running through the dungeon. Figure out how to incorporate that into part of their stat block, not part of their gear. Okay. That's all we really need to talk about with the Dark Elves. That's going to be a theme for every one of these modules, D1, D2, and D3. So the next big thing is as we're getting a little bit further into it, there are several interesting locations given, and this is a good example of how quote-unquote hand-wavy the game used to be, how it was more a collection of encounters, not necessarily a driving story or a true ecology. Okay, we talk about dungeon ecology sometimes when you look at world building. And I subscribe to that idea as well. There should be a food chain, and if you have creatures living somewhere, there's a natural food chain. There's predator, there's prey, there's so on and so forth. Things that don't exist within that food chain shouldn't be there. Why would they be there? If there's something of X amount of power in there, why isn't it running the thing? So we pay attention to that in 5th edition a lot better, 4th and 3rd. It's something that modern players and modern DMs have done more. Not a thing back in 1st edition. You're going to look in, we're just going to, let me do a little bit of screen trickery here again, and pull up another copy so I can have a map up on one side while we go to because we're about to get into there we go. Detach, go right side, and it's not gonna look very good, but that's okay, and I need you to go left side. Yay. Okay. Single page. Yeah, as you're seeing as I flip through these, you don't even really want to, even though I love PDF, you don't really necessarily want to try to run off of PDFs without a lot of preparation. I translate everything into D&D Beyond and a spiral notebook, and I'm good to go. Your prep's going to be what it is. The main thing I wanted to do was bring up the maps, kind of go side by side so you could see how crazy encounters were set up in this back in the day, how untenable they would be to run now. Although they sound really cool on paper, actually trying to make them work in context, number one's going to put a lot of work on you as a dungeon master, has the potential to really just beat a party down otherwise in challenge. So the entrance to the Grand Cavern we're looking at, and this is the Grand Cavern. By the way, remember, let me scroll that up a bit so you can see a little bit more. You know what? Let me flip my face to the other side because you probably want to see the pictures more than my face, and that's fine. The maps are 10-foot square grid. So this is a 40-foot wide passageway that your party's walking in to begin. And you can just look at that. I'm not even bother counting by, but I guarantee you that's 150 feet across and to the far side of the cavern. And it's going to wrap around every bit of 200 feet to the right side. Big, huge, large, wide open cavern. Stalagmites up. The room in the cavern is 200, 300 foot wide, 200 long, and from 175 to 250 foot high. Huge, big, huge areas. So right off the bat, you're thinking a lot of verticality that you got to prepare for. They're telling you there's positions for guards, 3 positions for bugbears, 4 positions for drow, represented by the D's and the B's on the map. Okay, so you see B over here. Oh, look, as soon as your party comes gallivanting down the stairs, I see 3 outposts of drow. Each drow has 1 fighter of 2nd level that's standing there, all positions where they can see each other, and they'll report. They're not there to fight. They're there to say, oh my gosh, we have incoming. Other than that, it's a big open area. It's important to understand that that big open area can turn into a, excuse my language, but a shit show really quick if you pay attention. Now, this is kind of a not exclusive to this dungeon, but every kind of cavern dungeon. Sound carries and echoes in the underground. Light is going to be a big deal for creatures in the underground. We all have dark vision. Yeah, I shoot fireball. Okay, that's light. That's a lot of light. That's going to attract a lot of everything. Smoke doesn't just float up. The environment's going to be foul. The air is going to be foul. Granted, with a 200-foot ceiling, you're probably not going to notice a lot of that kind of stuff. So just keep in mind that it's very, very, very easy. If you're playing by logic, if you're paying attention to, number one, a creature wants to survive, it's going to take so much damage before it runs off for help. Number two, sound carries. Number three, explosions certainly carry. This major cavern in the middle that you're looking at looks like it's a bunch of open area. If you also look around this map, you'll see how many, let me zoom out a couple clickities there, and you'll see how many other caves connect to that. And you can make the proper assumption that most of those caves are full of bad guys. So be prepared. This is kind of a prep thing, mental preparation as a dungeon master. You might want to adjust what's within these caves if you're paying attention to logic, because if you go with even half of what's there, your party's going to get swamped in the front door. And here's the flip side of that. You might say, okay, y'all got to be smart about it and deal with it. That's the challenge of it being a high level module. It's not just about making sure the difficulty check balances with the encounter. You don't necessarily have to guarantee that every fight is manageable. When your party gets to here, if they are dumb enough to walk through this gigantic cavern slinging spells, then what happens, because this is a mid to high level module. So rather than, this is my suggestion, rather than softening the environment around them, make sure that they understand the danger they're walking into, and that they've got to make their way through these caves quietly and intelligently, quietly, tactically. They can't just come in here brawl mode, because it's a brawl they will lose. Number one, you've got the guards that are just going to go tell everyone. They're not even going to fight. They're just going to go run off and go, incoming, instantaneously. And the bugbears are going to be a little bit more aggressive because, that's who they are. Two will attack while one goes to warn the others. The others being everything that's in these caves. Okay, so that little part of my rant over. Viable part. Not necessarily a rant, more of a preparation. So what are we looking at in here? The South Gallery, 14 piercers that'll fall on the party if they walk in, if they hug the wall to the left, which when in doubt, go left. A lot of people's, guiding principle when going into dungeons. The Glittering Cave is number 3. It's got some crystals and some stuff in here. There's a trapper sitting on the floor, which is basically a lurker above, sitting on the ground instead. Side Cavern has 15 gargoyles. 15 gargoyles along the side caverns. Large open air cavern, 65 to 80 foot height. So instantly you're getting bigger. That's a lot of gargoyles, y'all. Watch your count. We're not going to go every encounter, just kind of giving you guys just the left half of the troglodyte layer, how heavy we are. So the side cavern with 15 gargoyles hanging out on these ledges up above. Fun encounter, lots of space, big cave. That's going to be, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 60 by 70 with this 80-foot height. Your party's going to be working at range. It'll be an interesting thing. Okay, sorry. Had to phone check real quick. So from there up to 5, a very large purple worm with 6 eggs are resting in here. Okay, that's big, man. For back in the old days, that was just a fight. But for 5th edition lore, for world building, and for managing that encounter, a large purple worm, that's a big-ass creature. You're looking at I want to say giant 4x4. That's going to take up 20 square, 20 foot by 20 foot area by token. How is that not going to knock down walls and bring craziness raining down on the rest of your party is up to you as a dungeon master to figure out. That's my whole reference is understanding that how D1 and D2 is presented, how a lot of the older modules were presented, weren't necessarily paying attention to the ecology of a dungeon as much as it was giving players challenging things to fight as they made their way through it. So, you know, you may back off the purple worm there. You may have fun with it. That's up to you, man. If your party is mowing through things, have them get chewed on off. Have a purple worm chew on them while they're fighting 15 gargoyles. Yeah, everyone's like, hell, that's insane. That's my point. So you got 14 drow, 4 male, 8 female, and 2 leaders that are hanging out in Cave 6. This is where we get a little crazy here. Okay, 14 drow, and that's not what I'm talking about. Cave 7. There's a lich, Asperides, that hangs out in this nasty little cave here with all kinds of crazy shit. Yes, a straight up lich running around with a ring of protection with a AC -3. That'd be AC 23 lich by 5e standards. Full blown missiles, time stop, power word kill, auto irresistible dance, monster summoning 4, Mordenkainen sword, da da da. Very potent, very powerful lich that's sitting in a side room. This isn't the boss of the dungeon. This is just something that your party stumbles into. So, reinforcement of the craziness. Dozens of ledges, 23 gargoyles in room 8. 6 pack lizards in room 9. Okay, at this point, I don't think I need to keep going room for room for room. Just in the left half of the dungeon, we fought a purple worm, as written, 38 gargoyles, 14 drow, and a trapper, 12 piercers, oh, and a lich. Okay, take a breath, take a beat, back it off, because in addition to that, there's 32 ghouls, 4 ghasts, 32 ghouls, and 10 ghasts stashed in this cave over here. So you're probably starting to see how this was a crazy hard level module back in the day. It certainly doesn't translate very well to 5th edition, but if you're wanting a challenging, if your party's just steamrolling everything, go for it. Now, without fail, you're going to have to back down on the amount of enemies you use, especially if you're using 5th edition token and mapping systems. Some of the rooms are just too small to support that many enemies and still allow for token movement. Some of the creatures are too big for the space that you would assign them on. So use some common sense. Always at the end of the day, you have your own discretion as a DM. But yeah. So, you know, I don't want to go too far into it, but yeah, this kind of starts breaking into layers here. 16 through 18 is troll caves. 15 is a Hyraco-sphinxes. 2 sphinxes that hang out up here. They're waiting for their rides. The drow are going to go ride them home. Okay. 2 sphinxes that are just watching all of this crap go down, by the way. Completely forgot about those guys sitting there. Yeah, okay, I'm with you. Maybe take those into wyverns or something. I don't know. That's 16 through 18. That's just 3 little caves here. 10 trolls, 16 trolls, 18 trolls. A lot of trolls. Too many trolls. Too many trolls. And you get into 19 through 23 up here to the top and the right. These are the Troglodyte caves. Troglodyte warrens, these are the bugbear warrens. Lots of bugbears. Now, a lot of bugbears in one area can be trouble. They got reach. They got all. Bugbears are a group of bugbears is a reasonable threat for 10 bugbears is a reasonable threat for a group of 5 or 6 6, 7, 7th, 8th level people. Yeah, lots and lots of stuff. The chief bugbear chief in here, 12 more sub chief. So yeah, rooms 19 through 25 and 6 are chief and bugbear layers. And they connect back here into the Troglodyte warrens. The Troglodyte warrens run around in there. The eastern cavern is full of fungus and mushrooms and all that kind of crazy stuff. If you want to mess around with some toxicity, there actually are violet shriekers and violet fungi that are mixed in with that forest. So even if your party decides to move through here stealthily, they can trigger off some NPCs that bring everything screaming. Oh, look, more troll dens, even a chief troll. So, yeah. Didn't want to go into too much detail, but found us doing it. So that's the first part of Descent into Depth. So now you're kind of hopefully seeing D1 to 2 is an apt metaphor. D1 being the descent into the troglodyte layer, okay, which is all we were looking at on that, by the way. That's just the troglodyte section. Big, bruising, horrifying battle. Tunnels that lead off in a couple directions. How you manage that or what you want to manage for yourself as a dungeon, that's up to you. Like I said, this is just, we're looking at it from a 5th edition standpoint. From a dungeon ecology, the monster combinations don't necessarily match up. From a difficulty level, dude, that's a lot of stuff in a small area. That's a lot of big, nasty monsters in a small area. If you're prepared to run that kind of stuff at your groups, have fun with it. You know, we've got 2 wyverns, ironically, that are part of that. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. I don't know that I would run it as written straight up. Like I said, I would definitely probably get rid of the purple worm, replace the sphinxes with a couple other wyverns, and cut down on the monster numbers. Maybe spike up their hit point counts just to make up for the fact that, you know, 7th level, 8th level players are going to be able to crank out, you know, 20, 25 damage each, 2 attacks each. So give them something to chew through, you know. Or if you're playing the fodder thing where it's like 1 hit equals 1 kill because there's so many of them, have fun with that. But yeah, you can certainly give your party that cinematic where the walls are climbing with monsters and we've got to chop them all apart. Make sure that, you know, some of those aren't trolls. That many trolls coming in a party is bad news. Also remember, like we kind of, when I started talking about it, lightning bolts, thunder claps, all of that stuff, all that's just going to do is bring more and more and more and more and more noise. Your dark elves are intelligent. They're not going to fight to the death. They're going to let all these bugbears and troglodytes kill you while they run off and alert the rest of their guard posts. The entire paradigm of the sneak through the caverns changes how the Underdark trip can change to high alert status depending on how your party handles the entry into this. Okay? Next step is a couple more small little bitty encounters, but it goes directly into the Shrine of the Kuo-toa. Now, that's going to be this next map here. We'll just keep this nice and up and simple for now. So the Shrine of the kuo-toa was the 2-part of D1, D2. First and foremost, it's going to talk about the map's going to change a little bit. The terrain will change as your party moves from the caverns of the troglodytes onto this next section. Certain tunnels will be a little bit tighter, certain will be different. The random monsters will also slightly change. They changed out some of your more wild monsters and added a few more drow patrols. Kuo-toans start making the mix in. So it's a representation of you're deeper into the earth now. Things are getting a little bit harder. Kuo-toa, the crazy fish people that if they believe hard enough that in something that it manifests themselves as a deity. This was their first major appearance. Blibdibi Boop, I think, is their one of their many deities' names. This is a stark contrast to the Kuo-toans that we see in Out of the Abyss. Kuo-toans in Out of the Abyss and the Forgotten Realms are basically feral fish people. Think Murlocs from World of Warcraft. That might be the best way you could describe them. Whereas we're looking at them here, they're borderline a civilized race. But anyway, let's scroll down just a wee bit here. Encounter area W27. There's a river crossing that we'll deal with. A lot of the same content. This is still the same book, so don't think, oh, they repeated it. Remember, I changed the format view so we could look at it a little better. But the Kuo-toa Shrine is going to talk about your party has one chance, according to this book, this adventure as written, to find out there's this city full of fish people if they run into this this Svirfneblin. Now, if the Svirfneblin's part of the party, then all bets are off and things go hostile. So it's kind of one of those, if they learn what they need to learn, then they're going to be in trouble. If they go in there blind, they have a chance to negotiate it safely. Is that a good way to talk about it? So there's gnomes that have been trapped in here. That's one of the only quests that are given. Again, the main thing that the party needs to do is get out of here, go through here. They're on their way to the drow. Now, the advantage here is that your party isn't necessarily forced into conflict right off the bat. The challenge for you as a dungeon master is to understand that this is an alien group of people. If your party acts in certain ways that are determined by what you know about the kuo-toa and how they live in your campaign, the party can coexist and move through here relatively quickly. If your party is murder hobo-ish, antagonistic, if they have the savior complex, if they have anything other than an ability to adapt to the people around them, they're going to be at war with a city. And I'm not really exaggerating. Let me zoom in again on the map to the side here. It is a city. This is a 10-foot square grid. You're looking a lot of rooms, and you might notice all these little dashies. Let me zoom in a little bit more. I know it's hard to see on the blue. These are underground rooms. So in addition to above, you've got connection points and sewer systems underneath it. Big, 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 big map. Big city, lots of stuff going on. Lots of bad guys. Okay. Kuo-toas, just like most everything else in this book, are 5th edition. Compliant creatures, so you can find most of what you need within the monster manual. Out of the Abyss gives you some extra ones for like the monitors and the weird casters and stuff like that. So yes, this is a well-established city full of kuo-toans that your party has to make their way through. The Idle of Blidly Boot. So we don't need to spend much time on this other than the understanding that is not given by the book. The book does not give you, as the module has been published, excuse me, you're not given a bunch of information as a dungeon master to handle the role play and how to administer a successful negotiation with the kuo-toa. That's completely in your lap. So you can make it as easy or as difficult as you want. Once you decide on that, I would, honestly, as a dungeon master, I would definitely figure out a couple ways that your party can get through here without conflict, because kuo-toans are also fanatical. You know, if they did something to one, they would all come running. And this is their home, this is their shrine, this is their city. There's no retreat point. You're attacking them in their crèche, you're attacking them in their nest, you're attacking their seed mother themselves. You know, if they make fun of the strange statue that Blibdy Boop is, that can lead to outright war. That's a challenging aspect of this section of the module that I want to kind of close out on focusing on. There's not a ton of roleplay opportunity. Well, let me rephrase that. There's not a ton of roleplay guidance for you as a dungeon master. If you're looking at setting running this thing close to written, it is pretty murder hobo-esque. Some things your party is guaranteed to be in conflict. The Troglodyte layer, the bugbear, the Warrens, that's going to be a lot of fighting. How much is up to how your party handles that and how much you throw at them. The section here, if your party can manage to the expectations that you as a dungeon master are setting for them to deal with an alien culture, they could very well work their way through here in a peaceful manner. If the party if you've added Svirfneblins and some encounters with the deep gnomes as part of it, and your party joins up with them, then yeah, they're in hostilities day one and they're fighting a whole city. So I mean, so far we're too deep into this, two different maps, D1, D2, that are gigantic, sprawling areas full of hostiles that are just completely. Let me bring this up a little bit more so we can just kind of see. Troglodyte layer and Warrens here. Party comes in here and they get one of two ways out of there. A couple other hidden exits if they need to be. Full of bugbear, full of troglodytes, lots of trolls, a crap ton of ghouls and ghasts, a purple worm, 2 sphinxes, 2 wyverns, and a lich, just for good measure, in there. And if they get through here, the plus side is over here, there's just kuo-toa. The downside is there's a lot of kuo-toa, and some of them are pretty freaking powerful. So, conversion, 5th edition translations, stat block wise, not a lot of effort. Volume, way too many bad guys as written in 1st edition. Definitely make sure that you're trimming it down. Information as far as providing running the module, consider it just a, what we used to call it, an order of battle, total order of equipment. That's all it is. This many guys here armed with this. This many girls here armed with that. This many guys here armed with this. That's what D1 and D2 really, at the end of the day, the module is comprised of. A listing of stuff, a couple tips here and there. So ultimately, it's a great source book to amend Out of the Abyss with. It's a great framework to build your own adventure into the Underdark with. But it is not very useful as a standing product on its own to pick up and play. It's a lot of issues, a lot of challenges to take it from 1st edition to take it into 5th edition. If you're playing 1st edition, if you're playing 2nd edition, if you're playing OSR, any of those, it still stands the test of time. It's built for those rule systems. High level module. You're going to know how much of a murder grind it is once you see the number of bad guys that are involved. But again, your party's running 6 to 10 characters of 9 to 14 plus retainers, so that's what the system was designed for. These enemy counts were not designed for 5th edition play. That's the first thing you're going to have to look at. The strength of the Dark Elves was manifested both through their racial abilities and their equipment. So that's something else that you need to be aware of for, for translation purposes as well. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and close up here. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I will definitely tell you, like I said, this is a great product for nostalgia, to remind yourself, how the hell did we play that? It's an excellent supplement to add depth to a trip through the Out of the Abyss. It's an excellent framework to build around into an Underdark campaign. It is not the strongest module to run as written, but hey. Alrighty, guys. DMGeezerjim here. I'm going to go ahead and sign this recording off. Thank you so much for joining me, whether it was for a few minutes or for the whole time. I appreciate you being here. Don't forget to check me out over on Etsy if you just need a map or two. Love some help over on Patreon if you want to help support this stuff over on long-term stuff. Some of the long-term projects, feel free to click on the link down there on the YouTube page here. I try to make sure to get a couple items a month as a thank you to my Patreons for your support. And custom work available as well. Over on my Twitch thing, I'm back at it Monday through Friday, 11 a.m., 1 p.m., just chatting D&D. Got some gaming going on in the evening. Baldur's Gate 3 is a big thing right now, and I did get sucked in, just like a lot of other people. But by and large, thank you. Like, follow, subscribe, do all of that. If you know anyone that's into this stuff, feel free to share my videos as well. But appreciate your time. Be safe out there.